Good morning, everybody. We're going to go ahead and get started. We have our first presenter is the Department of Human Services. I can hear you. Is there? Do you have a little light on your?
There we go. Sorry about that. Let me try this again. Okay. As I've said in speaking with other committees here, we've adopted a new mission statement that we're in the business of providing Mississippians young and old with tangible help today to create a lasting hope for tomorrow. And we do that by leveraging a significant amount of federal funding. In fact, almost every program that we operate either is a federal state match or it's direct federal funding. So as I've indicated in speaking with the chairman in the past, I ask you to keep in mind that every general fund dollar that we get, we leverage it with additional federal funds. We are asking, and we did ask this year, for level funding at the level of $67,463,500 some odd dollars. The LBR request for us was about $1,700,000 less than that. And what I wanted to share with you just briefly is how that converts into lost federal funds that we will not be able to draw down if the current proposed cut, which is about a 2.6% cut. I know that doesn't sound like much, but if you look at the impact on our individual programs, for example, our economic assistance programs, if we lose about $600,000 in the SNAP and TANF programs, that translates to the loss of $26.5 million in federal funding. Our programs each have different federal matching ratios. The SNAP program is a 50-50 match. The child care program is a 1-to-4 match. We draw down 4 federal dollars for every 1 general fund dollar we spend. Our child support program is a 2-to-1. We draw down 2 federal dollars for every 1 general fund dollar that we spend. What we've tried to do in this handout that I gave you is express what an across-the-board 2.6% cut would do to each of those programs. So child support, for example, if child support absorbed a $300,000 cut, that would translate to $994,000 in lost federal funds that we would not be able to draw down. Support services, that's those of us who are doing the substantive work. A 2.6% cut there would impact our ability to draw $600,000 in federal funds there. In the childhood setting, if we were to lose just $211,000 in general fund funding would translate to almost a $2.7 million loss in federal funds that we would not be able to draw down. In our aging and adult services, even a smaller cut of $62,500 would cause us to incur about a $715,000 cut in the services we provide to older adults across the state. And then in youth services, as you may know, and I'm not sure how much the committee has been shared this information in years past, but youth services is the one division that uses almost predominantly all state cash, general fund monies. So a $351,000 loss, there's a little bit of leverage there, but a $300,000 federal fund loss would result if the LBR number is the budget that we received this year. We also had sent over with our budget request a couple of other requests. One of those was a request to reinstate something called the Adolescent Opportunity Program. That is in the youth services setting. Recently as November, the peer committee released a report that directed us in our Division of Youth Services and also the youth courts to find a way to reduce the number of youth in detention. And the way we would do that would be through reinstating the Adolescent Opportunity Program. That program has not been funded since 2016, and we are requesting the legislature to consider, we're asking you, ladies and gentlemen, to consider an $8 million funding request for that. Now, what is the Adolescent Opportunity Program? Well, that is everything that a youth court could do short of sentencing a juvenile to detention. Some of those programs are after school and weekend programs, job readiness programs, home detention programs, community service, conflict resolution programs, restitution and community services programs, and we have operated those in the past through a combination of mental health facilities and contracted with other providers. And I would ask you to consider allowing our agency and the Division of Youth Services to once again put in place the Adolescent Opportunity Program. It could have served several hundred youth in this past year, and most of our youth court judges are asking us to find them some alternatives to detention, because a lot of times what happens is a child appears before the youth court judge, and the judge has the opportunity to either do nothing or put the child in detention. And what the Adolescent Opportunity Program would do would be to give them a third alternative, to put that child into some kind of community-based program so that they could stay in school, so that they could get some job training perhaps, so that they could do some community service, something short of putting them directly into detention. One other matter I want to raise with you, and you have it in the material that I've shared with you. Our data systems, this is not in our budget request, but I'm asking you as an Appropriations Committee to begin to think about this. Maybe you, if we have the funding this year, you could begin this process. Our data systems are over 30 years old. And by that, I mean the eligibility systems that we use every day in determining eligibility for SNAP, for TANF, for child care assistance. And that dinosaur there on the handout is accurate, because recently, in order to find a technician to work on our eligibility legacy data system, we had to go to AARP to find a technician who knew how to work on the systems. They're written in COBOL. I don't know if any of you remember COBOL. That was a language that was taught back in the 80s to communicate to computer science students. They don't even teach it in the schools any longer. In our system, you have some screenshots. You can see what it looks like, how old it is. We have to take 19, 20, 22-year-olds, sit them down in front of a computer screen that has function buttons. It's a black screen with green writing, and it has function keys on it, and we tell them, forget about using a mouse, because this is an old COBOL DOS-based system, and a mouse is not permitted. You have to learn the hotkeys and the function keys. Those of us who started using computers back in the early 80s will remember what it was like when you had to remember what function keys did and what were the hotkeys in your programs. And as a result of the age of these programs, you'll understand that we face a retention problem with a lot of our eligibility workers. They come in, they spend 3 or 4 months, they get so frustrated working in this environment that they go somewhere where they can use a real computer with a mouse that's a Windows-based computer. Now, I understand this is a huge project. The total cost of replacing all of these legacy systems is $60 million, and I'm pretty sure this year is probably not the year to be asking you for half of that. We can we can leverage 50-50 match, but I'm asking you to consider giving us $5 or $6 million this year so we can begin the process of getting these ancient data systems replaced so that we can move into the 21st century at Human Services and begin to provide better service to you, better service to our clients, better service to the state of Mississippi. There's one other item that's in your handout that I want to mention to you, and this is a request that came to us through the Jackson Medical Mall Foundation and the American Heart Association. It's called the Healthy Food Incentives Program. There are a couple of bills that have already been introduced regarding that program. It would allow SNAP recipients to earn $1 for every dollar they spend on healthy food in the form of fruits and vegetables. We agreed to be a co-sponsor of that bill with the Jackson Medical Mall Foundation and the American Heart Association, but the funding is not in our budget. It would require, this is a pilot project they're asking for, it would require $700,000 to fund that pilot project across the state in order to allow SNAP recipients to earn a dollar for dollar credit or coupon basically for buying healthy fruits and vegetables in local grocery stores and farmers markets and that sort of thing. I wanted to mention that to you because we agreed to at least make the ask. It is subject to funding, obviously, and if you, ladies and gentlemen, find that there is no funding for that program this year, we certainly understand. But it's a great program. It's a great opportunity for us to, again, leverage the SNAP dollars that we have, and this program would allow a SNAP family to earn $1 for dollar up to $20 a day for every fruit and vegetable that they buy in a local grocery store or at a local farmer's market. So I think I have covered everything that I wanted to mention to you, and certainly am available to answer any questions that the committee may have at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. Appreciate your presentation. I've got a question on this youth, the Adolescent Opportunity Program. What is that $8 million going to? Is that employees?
That is going to employees, going to mental health programs to help fund their personnel that would be involved in the program. If we awarded a contract, it would go out in the form of a contract payments for personnel and for the actual programs that are being provided, for after-school programs, for community service programs, basically for the operation of the program.
And so these would be new employees?
They could be new employees. It may be existing employees at some of the mental health facilities and just funding additional services that they're not offering right now.
And when did you say the last time this program existed?
This program has not existed since 2016. The actual language of the statute says that we shall provide it subject to funding, and the Division of Youth Services shall establish an adolescent opportunity program, and it states that it's subject to funding, and we have not been awarded any funding since 2016.
And I remember those old computer systems. I'm kind of surprised they still exist, but in another way, I'm not surprised. Has there been any attempt to replace this over the prior to your arrival with the department?
There has not been in the 10 months that I've been there, and I'm not aware that there's been a recent request. There should have been a request brought before this committee, in my estimation, 5 or 10 years ago to start this process. We are, Senator, we are literally in what I jokingly call it the office. We're in the Ford status right now with our systems, and that's failure or repair daily. And we have a failure somewhere in the state every day with these legacy systems. And by that I mean an eligibility worker is sitting at his or her screen, and the screen just crashes, and they may wait 30 minutes, they may wait an hour, they may have to wait 3 hours. And that's total loss of obviously manpower, work time. More importantly, it's delay in handling the eligibility function so that that family that's waiting to hear whether they're eligible and whether their benefits are going to be started, they don't know. We don't know the answer. And so these systems are just like, the way our IT managers explain it to me, they're so old that every time we fix one part, because there's so much, as he calls it, spaghetti code written into the system, we wind up messing up something else.
Do you know what you're spending currently on repairing?
On repair, you know what the O&M is on that? I don't know, but I would say it's at least, I'm going to say it's probably about 3 FTEs, and I would say probably conservatively $500,000 a year, just to keep it running. And probably it may be 10 times that, Senator. I'm not certain. The operations and maintenance on this new system is estimated to be a $6 million cost once we get it in place.
Could you get back with me on a cost, your annual cost, and maybe go back maybe 5 years?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Be happy to do that.
Do any other members have questions?
I do, Mr. Chairman.
Let me recognize Senator Hobson first.
Oh,
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Director Anderson. As it relates to the AOP program, this would be a recurring expense, though, correct?
It would be, I think probably the ramp up the first year is probably the largest expense. I'm not sure it's going to cost us $8 million every year, but it would be a recurring expense. I think that's part of the reason. There hadn't been an ask since 2016 as far as I know,
Okay.
but it would be a recurring expense. Now, let me say this. We are pursuing possible grant funds as well. As you may be aware, the Department of Justice has an Office of Juvenile Justice Programs, and they award a lot of grant money all across the country. Our Youth Services Director and our Deputy over the Division of Youth Services are both looking at OJJP grant funding, and if we get some of that, we can replace the state general fund funding for this program because these sort of programs fit into the OJJP grant cycle.
Yeah, that'd be great. That'd be really good to see if we could get a grant to help pay for that, because as you mentioned, that's a big
Right.
recurring hit.
Right.
And I'm guessing that's part of, I guess that leads to my next question. That's part of your 22 request was about 10 million over your, I thought I heard you say you were asking level, but I see on our worksheet, you've got 77 million general funds and your FY 2021 estimate's 67 million. So
Right.
I'm assuming that $8 million is part of that additional $10 million request.
8 million, yes, that 8 million is in there, and then there's an additional amount that Youth Services is asking for some updates out at Oakley. But that's what the difference is. That's the primary difference, is that 8 million for the Adolescent Opportunity Program.
On the grant programs in particular, how are y'all monitoring the, like TANF and any other grant programs that you got right now?
I'm not sure.
How are you monitoring those? What are you doing to monitor those programs?
You mean in terms of operationally, how they function? We have we've always had, let me say that first, there's always been a monitoring division. It hasn't been functional frankly, until I got on board. It hadn't been robustly functioning. We have 12, 14 different monitors who do desk audits at the very least, and then they go out and do field audits if they have question calls from their desk audits, and they're going out and doing full field audits on all of our sub-grants at this point in time. We don't allow anybody to operate under a sub-grant without their having at least a desk audit from our monitoring division, and most of them, before they close out, they have to give us their general ledger. They have to show us every dollar that they've spent. We also have a claims review process now that's a lot more robust. And I'll tell you, part of what the problem was that led to the fraud and abuse that preceded my arrival was they were doing the monitoring, but when they found question costs, they were told, well, just don't worry about that. Just set that aside. Well, I'm going to be serving as a hearing officer actually starting next week. For the first time, we've had hearings for subgrantees whom we've imposed question cost findings, and they said, wait, we want to challenge that. Well, our rules allow them. We have an administrative process, but they've never been exposed to question cost findings. And so these are the first administrative hearings, and I told our administrative hearings division, which primarily does eligibility hearings, I said, I'll do those hearings myself. I know what we're obliged to do. I know what the law requires us to do to give due process to those subgrantees. So I'll be hearing about 4 subgrantee appeals of question cost. First one is next Thursday, I believe.
Good. Thank you for that. That's keep on doing that. Obviously, we want to correct the mistakes that were made in the past, and so
yes, sir.
I applaud you for your efforts there. Final question is as it relates to the computers, and you and I spoke about that about a week ago, and I didn't think about it at the time, but $60 million is an overhaul of your computer system. Obviously, it appears that we need to do something, but $60 million seems like a lot of money to do an overhaul of this. And I know you're only asking for, I think you said 5 or 6 this year.
Right.
But
well, we only need 30 million.
How many computers do you have? And I know software is part of the issue too, but it seems like an awfully high price tag. The ones that are
operating these eligibility systems, I'm going to conservatively say 1,000, at least 1,000 people who are using these computers, because we have 850 people out in the field offices, in the county offices. All of them operate these computers because that's only the eligibility function out in the county offices. And then we have in our state office another 150, 200 people who are the quality control function. But to do the quality control over the eligibility function, they have to go into the same old system and revalidate or validate and verify everything that an eligibility worker did. That's what our quality control function looks like.
Well, I think about probably you need a lot of laptops because of the mobility of a lot of your employees, and just having been through this with the education department, I think there's, ways, they're not super expensive. Of course, the life of that hardware is going to be, 5, 6, 7 years maybe, and you'll have to replace it, but I can't imagine a software program. I'd just like to talk to you more, and we don't have time because we could go into it in a lot of depth, but at some point we need to talk about that issue. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So back to, in layman's terms, what you just said, if I understand it. So under the grant and subgrantees proposal, basically there were things that didn't G-haul, if you will, and questions weren't asked, and under your procedures, you're asking questions. That's the hearing procedures. Is that right?
Well, yes. I liken it to what the joke I used to make about the difference between state court and federal court, and no disrespect to our state courts, but our rules were rather loosely applied, whereas in the federal court they were very stringently applied. We had rules in the past. We just didn't apply the rules. Well, we're applying the rules now.
Well, that's what I heard, that's what I thought, and I think that ought to be a lesson, not to preach, but that's a lesson in agencies and us up here, because I've said that in many different things. The rules are there, they're just not being followed. Right. And so then we hear about the problems, and so thank you for doing that. Second, I want to go to the AOP. I will say that when that AOP program went away due to the funding, that was a loss in our system, and I have experience in different capacities, because our children, as you've indicated, are it's an community alternative for instead of locking them up in juvenile detention. And based on everything that I've heard throughout this, from judges, attorneys, everybody, the AOP was a successful program in addressing our children. Yes. So while I'm with the chairman that $8 million is a lot on a recurring basis, I think it's money and that's a decision we have to make, but that's money well spent. This is the benefit of having the chairman of appropriations on subcommittee, so I'll throw this out. Maybe there's some other agency that has money that we could help find that money, because the AOP, and correct me if I'm wrong, your court system, your judges, honestly, your attorney general budget, your Medicaid budget or whatever, I mean, it all applies to that. So maybe there's some other funding that we can find from heaven forbid, a different agency
Right.
that it will help. And I'm just thinking of the court system, that I honestly believe that that's a money well spent to the AOP program, because guess what? Then you're taking a proactive effort, and later down the line, they're not in your criminal justice system.
Right.
I mean, would you agree with kind of what I've said on all that?
Yes, sir, I agree with that completely. And in terms of looking for other funding sources, I want this committee to understand, we are in the process of working out an arrangement for the students at Oakley to come under Medicaid for that very reason, to save the cost, so we don't spend additional state funds that could be 3/4 of that, well, 83% of that money would be federal money right now under the enhanced federal match for Medicaid. So we're trying to get our Oakley students covered under Medicaid for the same reason.
Because
to
many of those
save-
children are covered by Medicaid, correct?
Right, they are when they show up. They haven't been at Oakley until now, but we're in the process of negotiating an MOU with Medicaid to bring them under Medicaid.
And maybe just something else, I mean, the Supreme Court, to their credit, and does a lot with the Children's Justice Commission. They have done a lot, so, and I know they have pushed for, Justice Randolph has pushed for drug courts and things. So maybe there's some budgeting that could be looked at in the Supreme Court budget to address those. So, and then my last question is, this is just a clarification or an understanding. I always am out, I mean, in the public and all, and I always hear from the public that people that are using your SNAP cards, you know, that they're spending money on things like alcohol and other stuff. Do y'all have any figures? My guess is what I hear may not necessarily be what tends to be accurate, because my understanding is you can't purchase alcohol and stuff with benefits like that.
Well,
Can you weigh in on that?
Anecdotally, we do hear that from time to time. Those are the kinds of cases that our Inspector General Investigations Division investigates. If we find a SNAP vendor, a grocery store or any kind of store accepting SNAP benefits for unpermitted, unallowed costs like alcohol or anything else, then we will investigate it. I'm not aware that it's broad spread, but we do have investigations every year involving grocery stores, convenience stores, other stores that are trading, so to speak, in SNAP benefits in unallowed costs.
Just curious, do the stores, are they tasked with kind of being the gatekeeper on that or not?
Well, they are, because they enter into a participation agreement with the Food and Nutrition Service, part of the Department of Agriculture. But we're tasked with policing that through
Mr.
our
Anderson,
OIG.
I need to go ahead and cut you off. We have
Yes.
two more. Appreciate your presentation, and I know we'll be talking again before this budget's done.
Thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it.
We have up next the Department of Child Protective Services.
Do you mind if I remove my mask? Good morning. I'll start by saying I hardly think it's fair for you to ask me to follow my old boss. He's a little further along in the progress of reforming his agency. I suspect you'd like to know a little bit about me. I'm Andrea Sanders. I took over at CPS November 9th, so I'm in approximately a whopping 2.5 months of assessing the agency and making some decisions about the direction we need to head. Briefly, I'll tell you, I am a lawyer. I have a master's degree in social work. I'm a mother of 2 sons. I'm a wife. I have spent about 10 years working in the judiciary. I have spent over a decade working as a social worker, a therapist, and an administrator in mental health systems with families and children. So I've spent the large portion of my career in some way dancing around the systems that deliver child welfare in our state. I even spent 9 months at DHS in Family and Children's Services in the early 90s, and I will tell you that I ran out the door. So today, what I want to do is first of all, I think you've all been given our handout. I often say when I start looking at a program that is in need of attention, that we've got to get the basics right before we get fancy. So I know Bob had a fancy presentation. We've got a pretty basic sheet for you. And the fact is, there are a lot of fundamentals in this agency that need a lot of attention for a lot of reasons. So today our ask is very simple. What we want to do is ask you to keep us level funded. And I know that you've been asked many times to support this capital fund expense for a MACWIS replacement project. That is our legacy software system that is also in desperate need of replacement. That project, for whatever reason, one of the things that I've learned as I have been assessing the agency is that it seemed to have sat on the back burner for some time. So what I can report to you today is that we have all of the advanced planning documents and the RFP approved by the federal agency, AFC. It has been posted with ITS. It's been approved by ITS. And we are now in the question and answer period for vendors. We anticipate opening bids from vendors March 19th and scoring at that time, which would, if we have bids that are responsive and allow us to move forward, we will enter negotiations for a contract and hopefully have one by July 1. I suspect that is very different information than you may have hoped to hear or have heard in the past, but it's the truth, it's where we are, and I think one thing, if you ask around about me, is that you can expect me to shoot pretty straight with you. And, you know, to that extent, that's something you're just going to have to watch and see and get to know about me. But that project is, at the very least, behind schedule. There are some positive things about where we are in that process, in that this is a national initiative to replace these systems across the country. There are federal requirements that they have to meet, but if they meet those requirements, they're eligible for 50% matching money from or 50% federal money to support the project. So it is a dollar for dollar. For every dollar you spend, the feds will spend $1. I am very committed to making sure the project meets those requirements so that Mississippi maximizes that funding. The lucky part about being behind is that this puts us nationally somewhere in the middle of the pack of states who are already implementing this kind of change. And from my experience in state government, that may be lucky for us because the feds have had some time to work out kinks. Vendors who are delivering or building these systems have had some time to work out kinks. So, you know, for whatever it's worth, I think that in the long run, we will probably end up with a better product for it, but I want you to know that it is a very high priority for me. A number of the fundamental issues in that agency that need to change can all be fixed with a nimble, up-to-date software system. So not everything that ails the agency, but it will be, when we have a system in place that helps guide case management, it will take a lot of burden that staff are spending time on now off of them. The other part of our package this year is that we really just need to stay level funded. Like I said, we're in the middle of assessing where we are in the agency. I'm building a leadership team. I have David Barton with me today, who came over from DHS. He's the only person I've stolen from Bob. And Mark Smith. They both bring a lot of administrative experience in state agencies. And frankly, what I found when I got there surprised me a little bit. The infrastructure of that agency was never built out. It was funded. I think what happened is a division from DHS was plucked out of DHS, placed in a new building, and some high-dollar leadership was placed at the top. But it doesn't seem that a lot of attention was given to evaluating what that means in terms of creating a standalone agency. And I recognize that it doesn't necessarily stand alone, but if the theory is that CPS is going to share services with DHS, then that should have been given a lot of attention. So the good news is Bob and I have an excellent working relationship. I was his principal deputy and general counsel at DHS before the governor called me to work at CPS, and we both think there's a lot of opportunity. There needs to be a good, neutral evaluation of where the efficiencies are in sharing services. And in the past, I think that had, at a minimum, if it was done with some sort of old baggage and turf issues. Bob and I don't really have any turf issues at this point. We want to do what makes sense. So if there are services that make sense to share, we will do that. We will put procedures in place that guarantee internal controls so that they work efficiently. And if there are areas that don't make sense for us to share services, we won't. So I pledge to you that, number one, I'll shoot straight with you, and I'll come back and I'll let you know as I know more about where the agency's going. And I suspect you have a number of questions for me, so I would open the floor up for that.
Thank you, ma'am. I know you certainly came highly recommended for your position.
Well, thank you.
I believe I was part of the advise and consent committee that advised and put you in there. And to my knowledge, you're doing an excellent job right now. I did have a question about the computer system. It was supposed to go in, was it June of this year or was it June of last year?
No, the target date for the Olivia Y suit promises that we will have it by June of 2021. That is simply not possible, and that is something that, I thank you for asking that, by the way. I didn't tell you that one of the first things I did was ask to have a meeting with the monitors and then with the plaintiffs. And initially that was not against counsel's advice, but that relationship has turned over the years to be a very hostile, contentious relationship, which I don't think serves Mississippi well. I don't think we're going to fight our way out of that lawsuit, and I think that we have to demonstrate some good faith and then approach the judge and negotiate for a more reasonable settlement agreement. But my meeting with the monitors surprised the lawyers so much, they said, why don't we do it with the plaintiffs too? And I think that, my approach, I'm going to take ownership of the problems that we have. I didn't create them all, but they are mine now. And we're going to be transparent about what we're doing, and we're going to be strategic about starting to get some wins in that settlement agreement. But we will not meet that target. And I will tell you this, if we're going to spend anywhere from $30 to $60 million on a replacement system, I am very committed to getting a system that works for the agency. So it does us no good for me to rush and throw in place a system that could be there by next June. I don't think that a good working system can be in place by June of 2022. I might be wrong about that, but I would rather under-promise and over-deliver. So I'm not going to tell the plaintiffs that we can have one by 2022. What I can show them is demonstrated progress toward actually, at this point, we're still in the procurement phases, but selecting a competent vendor and ensuring that the agency is prepared to work with that vendor and create a system that meets the needs of the agency.
Have you updated the court with this delay?
Pardon?
Have you updated the court with your progress?
They just appointed, the federal court just appointed the judge from the coast, and I cannot think of how to pronounce his name at this moment in time. It's escaping me. But no, I have not met the judge yet. I have a meeting with our attorneys this afternoon to talk about strategy. We anticipate a status conference very soon. I think he's probably doing a lot of homework right now. We're very encouraged by the appointment. I think he brings the right amount of experience, and it's a complex case, and so I will be meeting with him soon. We just don't have a date yet.
Thank you. Any members have questions? Thank you.
Is that it? Thank you.
Ms. Sanders?
Yes, sir.
Would you and Bob mind getting together with me later on, and let's discuss your computer needs, your system needs?
Absolutely.
All right,
Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. Morning, Mr. Howard. Go ahead.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, everybody. Thank y'all for having us out today and talking about the great things at the Mississippi Department of Rehab Services. So, do I have 10 minutes, 15 minutes, hour and a half? What do I get?
You have less than 10.
Less than 10? All right. All right, before you get your presentation that we put together, for those of y'all that may not be familiar with us, we are the Department of Rehab Services. We provide individualized services to Mississippians with disabilities. We serve about 100,000 folks a year. We have offices from Corinth down to Gulfport, over to Natchez, across the Meridian. So we've got about 45 offices, and again, we serve about 100,000 folks. So everything we do is individualized. The goal is to help individuals live as independently as possible. So when you start off on page 3, these are our vocational programs, vocational rehab for the blind. And this is where we're helping Mississippians with disabilities go to work. You know, these are folks that come into our offices, say, look, I have a disability. It's an impairment to me reaching my employment goal. Can you help me provide services to get to that goal? So we do that. Last year, we served 16,000 of your constituents came into one of our offices asking for those services, and we provided services. Of the 16, 3,000 we made taxpayers. So 3,000 individuals we helped put back to work this past year and become taxpayers to the state of Mississippi. Third thing there is a return on investment. I do like to talk about this. Bless you. InSpark, which is through Mississippi State University, they do a return on investment study for us. And what they came back with was the return on investment on the state dollar is 2.8. What that means is for every state dollar you appropriate to us, when we put a person back to work through tax gains and reductions in public assistance, you get your dollar back plus another $1.80. That's what the 2.8 means. So, you know, I'd like to tell you, you get 180% return on your investment in our agency. So I know the market's not doing that good. So, you know, I'd like to say we're doing a good job. Fourth bullet point there is maintenance of effort. I do want to point out that this program does have a maintenance of effort requirement. What that means is you have to spend as much state money in the current fiscal year as you did in the second prior fiscal year. So we're looking at 2022. The feds are going to look at 2020 and see how much state money we spend in 2020, and we have to spend at least that much in 2022 or more. If not, our grant gets penalized that year and the next fiscal year. So it's a 2-year penalty if we don't meet that maintenance of effort requirement. Last bullet point down there are partnerships. You know, as the executive director of this agency, I've been the executive director for 6 years, and we like to look outside the box, looking at different partnerships. And one of the things we're really proud of is Project Search. Project Search is a program, it's a worldwide program to where we work with a school district and an employer. It's a school year-long internship where we take kids with intellectual disabilities in their last year of school, we pair them up with an employer, and they go through 3 job rotations, and they learn those valuable job skills and get ready for employment. So this past year, we're working with 7 school districts and 5 employers, and we're serving 50 kids. The goal was to do more than that, but because of COVID, we had some employers and some school districts want to postpone it a year. So if you see that last sentence, we actually have 4 additional sites who are on board to do it next year. So COVID kind of hit us a little bit on Project Search. But again, we're working with 7 school districts, 5 employers to serve 50 kids. But we plan to really take off and grow this thing once COVID is hopefully manageable. Second thing is something we've really been pushing hard this year, and that's internships. And really 2 reasons why. You know, as you know, the economy is hurting because of COVID, and we're finding that employers aren't doing a lot of hiring right now. So we like the internship program for 2 reasons. One, it gives individuals with disabilities the opportunity to gain valuable work experience. It gives those individuals the opportunity to put something on their resume. But then 2, our federal grant allows us to pay the wages while that person is in an internship. So we can go to businesses who maybe are struggling to meet payroll or revenues are way down and say, hey, look, we can partner with you. If you're willing to train this individual and help that individual gain valuable work experience, we can pay the wages of that person while they're going through the internship. So we really feel that's a win-win for businesses across the state as well as people we serve. So something, again, we're really pushing hard this year. And then the last bullet point, we're collaborating with the schools. Our federal regs allow us to serve kids as young as 14 years old. So we are going into the schools, working with the special ed departments, and trying to reach as many young adults as we can and either help them get ready for college, or if they're not going to college, help them get ready for the workforce. So we served 7,000 kids last year. I know that's a small number in comparison to the total number of kids across the state. But again, COVID hit us in the sense of a lot of schools went virtual. A lot of schools don't want outside people in the schools right now. So, you know, we struggle with that a little bit, but we anticipate that number really jumping up next year once schools get back to normal, or we hope they do. Looking over on page 4, these are the special disability programs. These are the programs where we provide services to Mississippians with significant disabilities to help them live at home. These are folks who, are nursing home eligible, and our goal is to keep them home with their families as opposed to living in a nursing home. So we serve 3,500 folks there, 3,500 Mississippians who would have been in a nursing home had it not been for this program that y'all are allowing us to administer. So 3,500 families were able to stay together. Was at the 5th bullet point down. Division Medicaid in their federal report, they report that it's $44,000 cheaper to serve someone at home as opposed to a long-term care facility in our independent living waiver, and $37,000 in our traumatic brain injury waiver. So, you know, just take the average of that $40,000 times 3,500 people. That's $140 million roughly that we've been able to save the Division of Medicaid by serving people at home as opposed to a long-term care facility. So again, through this program, you're allowing us to administer. We're keeping families together, but also hopefully creating a cost savings to the Division of Medicaid. Waiting list is down to 590. We've really worked hard to get the waiting list down. As of this month, 590 folks are on our waiting list, and we're continuing to work through that best we can. Looking over on page 5, tell me if I'm going too fast. I know you said I got 10 minutes, so I'm trying to run through it, but less than 5? All right, I'm talking faster. All right, DDS is on page 5. Social Security Administration, they rely on us to do the medical determinations for Social Security disability. Those numbers are down. We had 60,000 people apply for disability this past year. Normally it's 80 to 100,000. I think the reason is because of the enhanced unemployment money that was coming in, so less people applying for disability. And also we had doctors who were shut down during the pandemic, so we weren't able to do medical reviews. So those numbers are down. We expect them to go back up. But the last bullet point is what I want to bring to your attention. $312 million comes into the state every month through disability payments. So, you know, as I travel the state, some people believe in disability payments, some people don't, you know, just a difference of opinion. But I can tell you that a lot of money comes into the state to fund our economy through disability payments. So $312 million, that comes from Social Security Administration. That's not my number. That comes from SSA. And they tell us $312 million comes into the state every month through disability payments. So a lot of work being done there. Yes. Yes, sir.
I hate cutting you off, but we have to go into session
I
here
got
in
you.
2 minutes, and I know Senator Wiggins has a question.
Yes, sir.
And I know we'll all, this is just the initial part of this process.
Yes, sir.
We'll be
Yes, sir.
meeting again.
Okay.
I do have just one question. How long is that waiting list for the brain injured folks?
It's 590 people. I think our oldest referral is 2019. I think about a year old is our oldest referral, if I remember right.
All right, thank you. Senator Wiggins?
Yeah, thank you, and that's my question. I noticed that you said on your budget to address 150 individuals on your waiting list is 903,750.
Yes, sir.
That would be additional funds, right?
Yes, yeah.
Okay. I was hoping the chairman would hear this.
Okay.
On your $903,753 is additional funds for the 150 people on the waiting list.
Yes,
That's
yeah.
what you put on
That's
page-
to serve 150 people of the 590,
Right.
yes, sir.
And there's
Yeah.
there's factored in, there's usually an attrition rate, right?
Yes, sir, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
I
the attrition
noticed-
rate's about 15% roughly.
I noticed that LBR, with the LBR under, they are 848,237. So it looks to me like if we basically restored the LBR cuts, we would get the waiting list.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you what, LBR recommended, you know, level funding, 28.4 million, and 24.8 of general funds and 3.6 of tobacco funds. But now keep in mind, and that's what number 2 is down there, maintain current slots of 1.4 million. If y'all remember, I came to y'all last year because Medicaid's match rate went from 23% down to 16%. And because of that, we were able to take that cut last year. So what happened was LBR recommended level funding from last year to this year, but that includes the cut we received because of the reduction in the Medicaid match rate. So what's going to happen is July 1st, when Medicaid's match rate goes back to 22, 24%, whatever it is, we're going to need the 1.4 million to maintain the slots we have right now at the new Medicaid match rate.
But 904,000 will get that 150 on the waiting list.
Yes, sir.
Which will cut it down. Okay,
Yeah, yeah.
thank you.
So that's number 2. The other thing I want to bring up is number 3. Number 3, state match needed for the administrative
Mr. Howard,
costs.
I'm
Yes, sir.
sorry, we're going to have to
Okay.
adjourn here.
Yeah.
I would like to invite you back if you want to come back and
Yeah.
present the rest of your
Okay.
proposal to
Yes,
this
sir.
committee. We'll reschedule that.
Okay.
And certainly, you and I will be meeting
Yeah.
on a one-to-one basis.
Okay.
But,
Yeah, I mean, I'll be glad to come back, or I can meet with y'all individually, however.
I do want to offer you, if you want to come back and present to the committee, let me
Yeah.
know, and we'll
Okay.
we'll reschedule that.
Yes, sir. Okay.
All right, thank you,
Good
sir.
deal. Yes, sir. Okay, all right, sorry about that, yeah.